Hello and welcome to this week's edition of TRP News, the Rational Progressive, a production of the Rational Progressive and the United States Rational Progressive Party. I'm James Andre. I want to thank you for joining me this week, and here's what's been happening. This week, Monday, the 14th of September 2015, Kim Davis, the Rowan County, Kentucky clerk, has been released from jail and will be back to work today. That's this Monday. She was in jail, in case you haven't heard of this already, because of refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. She was ordered by a court to cease desisting, to stop not issuing licenses, and she refused to comply with the court's order to begin issuing licenses, citing her religious beliefs, and also among that, entailed in that, her name is on the marriage license as the county clerk. So she feels it's a violation and it compromises her morals. The judge ordered her to issue licenses. She refused, and she was subsequently sent to jail for contempt of court. After spending several days there, about I think it was like 4 or 5 or a week, she has been released and ordered to comply, and no word yet on whether she plans to comply or not. She did, however, leave the court to a party of sorts, a celebration involving a couple of Republican presidential primary contenders, and coming out to music of Eye of the Tiger, Rocky style, arms upraised, and a bunch of media attention from her supporters and that sort of thing. So all nonsense to me. If it's your job, you're supposed to do it. It has nothing to do with your personal religious beliefs. It has something to do with the function of the county government and the function of government in general. So let it go, as they say these days, and just do your job. We don't know what's going to happen. Her attorneys haven't said what's going to happen. Meanwhile, what's been going on in her absence or during her incarceration, her deputy clerks have been issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples, and at least one, if not more, have stated that they will continue to do so and continue to comply with the judge's orders. So she's back to work today. Clerks have been issuing licenses, and there's no word currently on what she's going to do. I'm sure we're going to find out. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of media attention. And she doesn't deserve it, people. The best thing that can happen is that we just ignore this. Some people have been saying, well, why don't they fire her? Why don't they just get rid of her? Well, she's an elected official, and as such, in the state of Kentucky and the county of Rowan, you can't just be fired. You were elected by the people, so there's a whole governmental process that has to be undertaken involving a committee or the governor, that sort of thing. And basically, it's like an impeachment process, and that's the only way to get rid of her is through this drawn-out legal governmental process, which basically will just give her that much more attention, kind of turn her into a martyr, and no one wants to see that. No one wants to see that at all, and I'm sure not even the governor, or even those in government who support her beliefs. The only other way besides this sort of impeachment process is if she resigns, which is what people have been begging her to do. And of course, why would she do that? She's getting national media attention, she's probably barely had any attention most of her life. So why would she now suddenly give up the spotlight? And I'm sure she's being courted for media appearances. Basically, it's a money-making scheme at this point. Has nothing to do with religious beliefs. It's just like having 37 Republican presidential candidates. It's about raising money. It's about increasing your profile so you can get a book deal, you can get TV appearances, you can get speaking engagements, and that's what it boils down to. So people's lives are being played with over nonsense, and basically a reluctance to engage in this kind of tar baby this woman has become, whereas it's just there's no political upside to engaging in this for anyone. A politician who's a supporter or against. There's really no political upside. So we'll see what happens. She's back to work today as of this publication. And, you know, it's just going to be a continuing mess for a little while. I think what's going to happen is she's going to stick it out for about another, I would say, 1 to 4 weeks. This is my prediction. 1 to 4 weeks before she resigns, before she's garnered enough attention and interest where she feels like she can make enough money doing something else. And in fact, the job will be holding her back in her personal life. So we'll see how long this ideological stance lasts, and my prediction is not more than 4 more weeks. So on to the Democratic primary. You know, this is just, you know, a lot of the same nonsense has been going on. Not much new has happened in the past week, unless you count more of the same as new. Things like the one significant thing that has happened is that Bernie Sanders has managed to take the polling lead in Iowa and New Hampshire. He's had the lead in New Hampshire. He's increased it by a couple of points and has managed to actually take a lead in a poll. I think it was a CBS poll in New Hampshire. So he's leading Clinton currently in those 2 states. And so there's a lot of reporting on that, and oh my gosh, Bernie's going to, you know, win. He's beating Clinton. You know, of course, it's just if you've watched these videos, you know my position on this is that it's much ado about nothing. In fact, I will say it clearly and emphatically right now: the election is over. Hillary Clinton is our next president. Good for Bernie Sanders. I have nothing. Well, I only have a few minor things against him. And that I won't talk about that right now, but I would just say that this is more of the same. We're hyping those 2 polls that he's leading in, and you know, and sort of hyping the fact that Hillary has actually lost her substantial lead, when in fact, of course, we're talking about polls in 2 states, and there are 48 others where he is not leading. 48 other states. 48 out of 50, Hillary Clinton is leading. And in fact, the positive support among Democrats for Hillary Clinton is like 75 or 80%. So Clinton is not going anywhere. As I said before, basically, for Bernie to win, Clinton supporters would have to be abducted by aliens, or Clinton would have to drop out of the race. That's about the only way Bernie has a path to the presidential nomination. Now, a lot of people are, I think the first primary is February 1st, and, you know, so there's a long way to go. There's some speculation about Biden getting in, and that's not going to happen, people. There was some hype about an interview he did last week, and the interview he ended up kind of hedging again, but it all points to the fact that he's not getting in. It's far too late. The support, so many people are committed to Hillary at this point. Not only that, I honestly believe the whole Biden might get into the race thing was just an attempt to distract from Bernie Sanders. I don't even think there was ever any intention of him getting in. I just think it was intention to steer the media dialogue for a week or 2 or for a month until Congress gets back in session, which Congress is back now, and just sort of blunt his energy and his momentum. I won't really call it momentum because his numbers aren't that great, aren't that surging. You know, people want to say surge. It's surging. Well, you know, it's not really surging. You know, Hillary Clinton's numbers are eroding. Well, they're not really eroding. It's so early. February 1st is the first primary. So we've got a long way to go. A lot's going to happen between now and then. One thing that people are another thing that happened in the past week is that Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, the chairperson for the Democratic Party, came out and said in an interview, they did some sort of press conference, and she said there will only be 6 debates. So people are crying about this. There's only 6 debates. There's only 6 debates. And she said emphatically that any candidate who participates in an unsanctioned debate will be disinvited from the 6 sanctioned debates. So that means if you want to debate, be part of the official 6 debate program for the Democratic National Committee primary, then you will debate those 6 and only those 6. And you know, my position on this is I see nothing wrong with that. We have a lot of people crying about it online and calling for Debbie Wasserman-Schultz's job. And you know, it's just so sad. You know, first of all, I wonder how many of these people are actually Democrats. Now, I'm not a Democrat, so I don't know if I'm just, you know, I say I'm the rational progressive. I'm rational about these things. So I don't know if I'm just a lot more rational than a lot of people. But it's the Democratic primary. Why would you be crying about them trying to get the person they want to be the head of their party? The nominee, if they become elected to the office of the president, is the head of the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders is not even a Democrat. So why would you be surprised that they're trying to make sure that they get the person they want to lead their party? So, you know, and what I was saying about it being sad is that, you know, it was only, you know, 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, that Debbie Wasserman-Schultz was everyone's darling. You know, she was the one who was out there standing up for Obama and doing the right thing, and people wanted her to take on more of a role. You know, a lot of people were asking for her to be out there more, to take a more active role in promoting Democrats. Now we've got people calling for her head. Well, who are these people calling for her head? First of all, it's just freaking annoying. You annoy the heck out of me if you're one of those people who every time something happens you don't agree with, you're like, sign a petition, get them fired. You know, it's like, okay, well, what have you done in the Democratic Party to feel betrayed? Like, were you in on the debate planning process? Did you even go to one of these meetings? Did you read the minutes? Do you even know what's happening? Do you even know how a chair gets appointed? Do you even know who the committee members are? So it's just ridiculous and sad. And not only that, it's just this whole, like, things have gotten so muddled. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. People talk about the energy in the Bernie Sanders campaign. Well, that's because he's taking the fringe of almost like the 60% of the groups out there. So he's not only got like staunch liberals and progressives, but he's got the libertarians too. You know, he's got the disaffected Republicans. So that's not a coalition, people. I'm sorry to tell you that's not a coalition. And, you know, so I'm not surprised. Personally, I just think it's, again, I've said this before, it's the Naderism. It's the Nader-style campaigning. You show up at the party and then try to organize it after it's already underway. You know, show up and point fingers. Well, where were you during the planning process? Not only that, you know, did you help blow up balloons? Did you do anything? No, you just showed up and now you want to tell people that they're having fun in the wrong manner. And it's just not the right way to do it. And I've said this before, you know, it's not, this is just really the thing I want to hammer home. Not whatever Bernie Sanders' shortcomings are, and I think, you know, we all have them. That's why I don't think calling for his head for some of the mistakes he's made is right. I don't think calling for Clinton's head for some of the mistakes she's made is right. But whatever people's shortcomings are, you know, we all have them, and that's not really the issue. So, but what was really key and what's really important, and I think it can't be stressed enough, is that Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. And when I talk about the Nader style of political campaigning, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We're putting too much weight on the office of the president. What's really important is that we need someone with Clinton's experience and resources and connections to uplift those people who are down the ballot on the lower, you know, the Senate, and state level Democrats who will be campaigning. Bernie doesn't even have those resources, so how's he going to support the down ballot candidates? We've got 34 Senate seats up for grabs this election. How is a non-Democrat going to support the Democratic candidates? And it's just not going to happen. So this is a huge, huge issue. Bernie Sanders, as much as he can control the media and the conversation, as much as he has good things to say, will not be able to support down-ballot Democrats the way Hillary Clinton can. And trust me, we all know the struggles Obama had with the Congress and with a Republican Congress, and it's not enough just to put someone in the White House. We have to do a lot of work on the ground, and I've said this 100 times, I'll keep saying it. Trust me, folks, the government is being run by Republicans. I'm not talking about Congress. I'm talking about your state government, your county government. These bodies are largely Republican. Why? Because Democrats want to come and cry, and they want to do the Ralph Nader thing every 4 years and just get up and get energized then. No, it's an ongoing process. And trust me, these Republicans know that. They're out there all the time grinding, making sure they get every office they can, because that's about political support, that's about political connections, and that's how you make sure you're able to do what you're trying to do and forward your agenda. When you have, even if these are unrelated offices to what your agenda is specifically trying to accomplish, it helps to have those connections. So we have to think about this in terms of the big picture, not just, oh yeah, Bernie Sanders talks a good game, or Clinton had some email problems. And speaking of Clinton's email problems, turns out her server may not have been quote unquote wiped at all. Apparently this came from Trey Gowdy, or whatever the heck his name is, this dumbass on the, try to keep my language limited to that extreme, but this guy who's been investigating Benghazi and everything else he can get his hands on is apparently the one who started this whole thing. Turns out the people who sold and managed the server say, to their knowledge, nothing was wiped, quote unquote wiped, which usually entails a complete degaussing or some kind of magnetization of the disk in the server, or the memory storage in the server, so that there is no way that any data can be recovered in the future. Well, apparently all Clinton did was delete go through the emails, delete her personal emails, and forward her work emails to the State Department. So there was no actual wiping of the server with a cloth or with anything else. And so that apparently turns out to be a myth. Also, this past week, the Justice Department came out and said Hillary Clinton did nothing wrong. So this is what I was saying earlier about more back and forth and more of the same. You know, it's just back and forth, and it's all nonsense, folks. It's a sideshow. It's all meaningless, because this is inside baseball. This is just stuff to distract you. It's stuff for people to make money on and to campaign on, and it's about money, you know. So the opposition is raising their profile by hyping something that is minuscule, and the media is doing the same thing. So the other thing that happened this last week, and I have to kind of laugh about this one too, is that Cornel West, I think more than last week, came out and endorsed Bernie Sanders. But last week they went to a historically black college, and he introduced him. And apparently Cornel West, Professor Cornel West, has been campaigning with Senator Bernie Sanders, and he is apparently a big supporter of his now, and thinks and is trying to help Sanders drum up support in the African American community, where he is notoriously weak. And it's just funny, because Cornel West is a professor and a African American activist who has a long and respected record of activism and writing and interest in social justice issues. And but of late has begun attacking anyone who he doesn't agree with. Again, I think partly just sort of losing it mentally, and partly just trying to maintain his public profile, and actually applied the version of the N-word to the president, and went out there and basically said that that's what he is, that's what he should be called. And to me, any black person who advocates the use of the N-word against another black person, you are essentially, you've lost your mind. So that's all I can say about that. A lot of people, he doesn't have the same cachet. He's disrespected the President Obama. He's disrespected several respected media figures, African-American media figures, and African-American writers. And now he's endorsed the old white man to be president. Now, there's nothing wrong with, we've had plenty of old white men be president. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just pointing out Cornel West's sort of behavior, and the fact that I don't know how much it's going to help Bernie Sanders. And this was just something that happened in the past week. So, not only that, I mean, I can see how some conservatives and some of those people I mentioned before of the libertarians and some of those right-wing Bernie Sanders supporters, how are they going to feel about a sort of quote-unquote black radical being one of his campaign compatriots? So we'll see how it pans out. I can't see it being more than a flash in the pan. But Bernie Sanders, folks, he's a panderer. I don't, you can hate me, whatever, but he's one of the biggest panderers I've ever seen. And I've heard him say some things that literally I think he's only said because he thinks they'll be popular, not because they make any sense. One quick example is all the bills he's proposing. I'm a bill to do this, a bill to do that, and he proposed a $1 trillion transportation bill. Well, if you've been paying attention, we haven't funded the transportation bill in years. In fact, we can barely get a 6-month patch going to keep the transportation funding going. So to say, oh, I've got a bill that's going to put $1 trillion in the transportation fund, it's just a joke. It's absurd. It's really deceptive to me. Because it's never going to pass. And, that just goes back to Sanders' record. 37 years in Congress, 332 bills proposed, 3 passed. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, Congress is back. The boys are back in town, and the girls. And what's on the agenda for Congress the rest of this month? Not a whole lot. As it turns out, business as usual in the obstructionist Congress and the ideologue carnival that has become the United States Congress, House of Representatives, and the Senate. So what has been happening? Well, what hasn't been happening is much work on the Iran nuclear deal or any much work on the federal budget or much work on that transportation bill I was talking about, or any work on what to do about the debt ceiling, which we are going to hit this November. So none of that's happening, but what has happened is that the House took a vote on the Iran nuclear deal and rejected it. But why is that nothing? Because there is no vote possible in the Senate. It's already a done deal. In fact, it was a done deal before the House took a vote on the Iran nuclear deal. Republicans and ideologues among them do not want this deal. What the alternative is, well, I would say I don't know, but we all know the alternative is more of the same, reliance on oil, more money into the pockets of the military-industrial complex. And how do we do that? Bomb, 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 bomb Iran. So that's what people want. They want more conflict. They want more war, basically in order for their friends and their supporters, their donors, to make more money. So the House rejected the Iran deal, but the Iran deal is a done deal as far as the United States is concerned. Not only that, it's a UN deal, so it's a P5+1, which is the UN Security Council that has negotiated and agreed to the deal, and everyone, of course, but the United States and our little happy clown car of ideologues is the last ones to sign on. Well, what this means essentially is that there couldn't be a vote in the Senate to reject the deal, so there is no rejection. And even if there was a vote and it did somehow manage to come up to a vote and get sent to the president would veto it, and there's not enough votes to override the veto. So it's all said and done. There will be an Iran deal. You know, we're going to monitor it. I don't even want to go into this. It's just nonsense. If you think this deal is a bad idea, then you are either stupid, evil, or ignorant. And it's just flat out how it is. Because as I've told you before, if you watch these videos, you know, and I just saw it somewhere else, nothing is off the table when it comes to politics. So there's always something that can be done. So taking one step is not, there's not some sort of ultimatum, there's not some sort of like blind alley we end up down. There's always something else we can do. So to say don't take a step towards peace is just, as I said, ignorant, evil, or stupid. And that's just the way it is. And you know, I got to have a little plain talk there, because we are talking about nuclear war. We're talking about the alternative being war, and I just can't, you know, I don't cotton none of that. So it's just ridiculous. This is a good step. Well, whether it'll work or not, and as I said before in the past in one of these reports, this isn't about whether we trust Iran. It's about we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust Iran because we aren't worthy of Iran's trust. So that's where the skepticism comes in. The skepticism doesn't come in because the Iranians' nature, somehow they're a bunch of liars. Is that really, is it, you know, because think about it, that's what they're kind of saying, right? They won't live up to their agreement. They're lying, deceitful, and they're full of tricks. Basically, you know, conniving, dark-skinned people. So think about it. Is that what they're really saying? But they're not saying that. What they're saying is they won't live up to the agreement. Well, why wouldn't they live up to the agreement? Why not? So they get the lifting of sanctions. They get a better relationship with the United States. Why wouldn't? We're working with them in the fight against ISIS. Why wouldn't they live up to the agreement? Well, because we've treated Iran like crap. So we've done a lot of things to them in the past, historically, militarily, economically, and politically. And so, of course, we don't trust them because they have every reason to try to get one over on us. So that's what the problem is. It's not because of the nature of the people of Iran or the government of Iran. It's because of Iran's resentment of the things that we've done to them, that we don't feel that, you know, and that's why these Republicans have their shorts all in a bunch, because they know. And not only that, they're literally saying, let's screw them over again now. So of course they're afraid of Iran, what Iran's going to do. And they should be, honestly. But as far as them getting a nuclear weapon and us worrying about having a nuclear conflict with Iran, you know, even if that was a concern, and let me just say the odds of this happening are near zero. That's about as close as you can get. And if it did ever happen, we are talking about 50 years from now. And that seems to me to be plenty of warning. So, so they rejected the Iran deal, and they did actually present a budget. And why is that nothing? Because this is a budget that defunds Planned Parenthood and repeals the Affordable Care Act. So there's just one big drum in Congress, and the Republicans can't stop beating it. And you know, there's a little side tom now, hand drum, that they have for Planned Parenthood. One's the Affordable Care Act, the big giant one, which, you know, there's something, I think we're over 40 votes now trying to repeal it. And now this, of course, the Planned Parenthood video, which is complete nonsense and a smear job. And so now we are trying to make sure any federal funds that go to women's health care do not go to Planned Parenthood. And in fact, that's not even enough. Now we're having hearings about it. So, transportation bill unfunded, Iran deal incomplete, TPP still being worked on, debt ceiling almost reached. Federal government is running out of funds, people. Federal government shut down October 1st. Federal government will have no more money. We're talking about Planned Parenthood. That's what's really important. So here we are again with the same old unproductive ideological BS that is not serving this country at all, and in fact is holding us back. So that's what they're talking about. Planned Parenthood Affordable Care Act and hearings on Planned Parenthood. That's what they've managed to get done. A vote that does nothing as far as the Iran nuclear deal, and a budget that will never be signed by the president ever in a million years. In fact, ever by any Democratic president. And in fact, this budget proposal would never even get to a president's desk, even if we had a Republican president. So, you know, it's just nonsense. We have, as I said, so where we are on the serious work of the federal government in Congress is that we have no federal budget. Funds are due to run out September 30th, so that means October 1st we're looking at a shutdown. Typically, the agencies manage to work things around for a few days. So there's various shutdowns. It's not the entire government at once, but various agencies will shut down over the course of a week, usually by an end of a week. So by October 8th, then we will be completely shut down, or shut down except for all necessary operations. And other than that, we have the debt ceiling, which I think November 14th, the CBO is saying we are going to reach the debt ceiling November 14th. So, you know, the federal government cannot borrow any more money once we hit the debt ceiling. That means that also the government will shut down. So 2 shutdowns in the works. And this is what I told you before about this whole Democratic primary process. You know, Biden comes out, distracts us for a couple weeks, and now we've got the government shutdown, which typically this whole mess will go into December, which means that we have January, which is the actual primary month where people will be paying attention. But, you know, this after the holidays, the Super Bowl, and February 1st comes, and then it's the first Democratic Party primaries. So we're going to see Bernie's star start to fade here pretty soon. That's my prediction. I'm saying it here, and that's just the way it is. But Congress, once again, doing nothing. McConnell and Boehner, the Senate and House leaders of the Republican Party, unable to corral their caucus. And in fact, it's a fractious caucus. You've got the Tea Partiers, you've got the Wingnuts, and you've got the few mainstream Republicans left. And folks, I'll say it again here just as a side note. This is what you get when you fall in love with term limits. Yes, I know, you know, some people get in there and it's just, it's not good that they're there that long. But then the flip side of that is you've got people who really don't give a damn. They don't care if government works, and they don't even know how to work government. So, you know, you get people elected, they're fresh and new, but they will not accomplish anything. And folks, this is a legislature, this is the business of writing laws and doing things in a way to help the government function and to allocate funds and to support and improve our society. And if these people are just so ignorant that they can barely put their pants on in the morning, then it's not a good thing to have them in there. In fact, I'd rather have someone who's been in there 20 years and knows how things work and has built relationships than I would have some newbie Tea Partier who doesn't care about anything and only his ideology, only what he believes to be moral and correct. Basically the Kim Davis of the Congress. It's against my moral code. Well, this is not about your moral code. This is about running the country. Okay, so wake up, folks. Let's not do this Nader thing. Get these down ballot people elected. Get these state and local people elected. Vote in your county elections. Make sure that you're not letting the Republicans sweep the down ballot, which they do time and time again. You take a look at these blue states, I'll keep harping on this. Look at these blue states. You look at California, you look at Michigan, you look at these blue states, New York, and then you take a look at their county governments. You take a look at their local government. It's Republican. It's all Republican. So just keep that in mind, people. There's a lot of work to be done, and 99% of it is not in the office of the presidency. And on the migrant front, this is something I've been talking about and will continue to talk about. I think this is an important issue, and as a matter of fact, I think this is right up there with money, energy, and human rights, the three big issues facing the global society of human beings. This migrant issue, refugees / migrants. I just call them migrants because there's people trying to move from one place to another. Some are refugees, some are economic migrants. For whatever reason, they're trying to go from one place to another. But trust me, they are not traveling these distances without a good reason. If things are good at home, then why would you leave and travel on rickety boats in the holds of ships? There's even an image, I'll see if I can put this up for you right now. This guy crammed into the engine compartment of a car trying to cross a border. And this is the kind of thing people are doing out of desperation, taking their kids and children. And unfortunately, you saw it again, and this is so sad and so horrible, and this situation is so bad enough. I will show you this image again. Warning, this is graphic and disturbing, but here is some of these images from these children washing up on beaches after drowning, attempting to get to another country. And this is serious, people. This is people do not sacrifice their lives, their kids, their safety, everything they have at home without a good reason. So these people are desperate, and they are motivated, and they're trying to make a better life for themselves. So in that news, on one front, Germany has been encouraging other EU countries and other countries to do more to accept refugees, but even Germany this week has clamped down on its border with Austria. Angela Merkel instituting checkpoints and more restrictions, and actually sending riot police to help control the border. So here's a big issue, folks, and here's one thing here's a couple things I want to say about this. We really need to turn from, now, you've seen the bombed out buildings in Syria, but it's beyond even that. We have warlords and despots and people who are interested in consolidating power and controlling resources and limiting the potential development of their area, of the world that they live in. So you have people who can't make a better life for themselves. A lot of people are starting to attribute this to climate change. So there's drought. There's areas that used to be very lush that are now desert. There's less food and less ability to survive for yourself. And so people have to move. Now, there's some talk, they said this past week, President Obama said that the United States will take in 10,000 Syrian refugees. Well, to me that's meaningless. Now, I'm not knocking President Obama, and I think it's a great thing for those 10,000 Syrians who do make it to the United States. But there's thousands and thousands of Mexicans and Central Americans and South Americans who are in equally desperate situation. I mean, there's people being murdered south of the border every day, mass graves. You can't drive down the street without getting in the middle of a gunfight. I mean, these people, these gangsters are so in love with their weapons, they're getting them gold-plated with filigree on them just to kill people with. So there's more of a problem than just 10,000 Syrians, number one. And not only that, Asians, Southeast Asia, there's a huge problem there. So 10,000 Syrians does not mean a whole lot except to those 10,000 Syrians. But as I've said many times, 50 to 60 million displaced people. The UN says this is the worst global crisis since World War II. So 10,000 is a drop in the bucket. And the bottom line here is, this is what I want to say about this, is that accepting migrants is fine, okay? You know, we have to do what we can. These people are on the move. First of all, I think people have a right to move. I think, you know, you can't buy up the globe and then tell people they can't go anywhere. First of all, I just think that's morally wrong. But on top of that, so it's good that some of these countries are doing what they can to accept these migrants. However, we really need to start devoting resources to solving these problems where these people are coming from. Okay, so we've gone in, we've destabilized countries, and I say we, I'm talking about the United States and our military. We've gone in, we've destabilized countries, and we're not the only ones, don't get me wrong, I'm not just singling us out, but I'm just saying as an example, and as the most powerful military force in the world, and the owner of the currency, the global currency, the US dollar, we have a lot of influence over what happens in these areas, whether we like it or not. And here's my point. We have a lot of influence beyond the military. We have a lot of influence beyond drones and bombs. So it's time to start dealing with this problem at the source. And here's what I've been thinking about, and I've talked to a couple of people about this, is first of all, we've fallen in love, for example, with the idea of borders. You know, we're building these walls, and people are talking about building more walls, and Hungary's building a 109-mile wall, and we've got to protect our borders. We've got to protect our borders. Even Germany has fallen victim to this. Well, we've fallen in love with the idea of a border, and this happens to people, okay? We fall in love with the idea of something, and we forget what purpose it's supposed to serve, you know? And, you know, a good example, organizational example of this is Doctors Without Borders, okay? They say people need health care and borders don't matter, right? So I'm a doctor, and I'm going to go where the sick people are. So a border is not something to be enforced at all costs. A border serves a purpose, and that purpose is not necessarily just to make sure that people can't get from one side to another. That's not what a border is all about. We've become like confused about this. We've just become so accustomed to the idea of borders, and historically have fought so many wars over them and instituted them so arbitrarily around the world that now we've sort of fetishized the idea of a border. Now, what I'm saying is that there should be a border to services and a border to authority, but not a border to human rights, okay? People have, if we believe in our Constitution, we believe in certain inalienable rights, then we believe in those rights for everybody. Now, we have a legal concept here, which basically, in this country, which basically says that those rights only apply to American citizens. But I think it's time to start expanding that mentality and say that if we believe these are inalienable human rights, then they belong to everyone. And we need to start thinking about what a border only is good for, what we are willing, where we're willing to extend our authority, and where we're willing to extend, for example, the defense of our people, and where we're willing to, the limit of the geographic area we're willing to provide contiguous services, that kind of thing. It's not necessarily just about restricting the movement of people, and I think that's what it's become all about. And in fact, we don't even respect those borders when our interests are challenged, when the oil fields are challenged in the Middle East, or when Syria turns out has chemical weapons, or when Saddam Hussein does something, or when Muammar Gaddafi does something wrong. We don't respect those borders then, and what I'm saying is we should not be respecting those borders now. So it's time to change our paradigm, people. We need to stop fighting wars of aggression and wars of bomb dropping and start fighting wars of human rights. We need to not just promote American ideology, but we need to promote the American morality as far as inalienable human rights, the rights of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and we need to facilitate that happening for people. So we have to stop fighting over oil and land and start fighting over human rights. We have to fight the mercenary control of innocence by terrorists and despots, and we have to fight the mercenary concentration of wealth by the avaricious and the sociopathic. So this is what we need to be focused on. We need to go to wherever these sources of refugees, whether it's Syria, whether it's North Africa, and we have to start investing effort and money and manpower into producing something good and positive, not just bombing things to the ground. We have to start devoting that energy into building things. We have to create these economic conditions, these conditions of safety and security, and allow people to thrive where they are. And I've said this before, we've still got thousands, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people living in refugee camps for the last 15, 20 years. These people have been living in camps depending on having food trucked in, depending on having water trucked in, no police, no limited sanitation. So it's time to stop respecting borders for the wrong reasons. We need to forget about borders and start thinking about people, start thinking about their human rights, and stop bombing things to the ground and start building things, because that's what's going to get us out of this. Not only that, that's what's going to combat the ideology of these despots and terrorists, these groups like ISIL, is to give a better alternative. And a drone is not a better alternative. Okay, and finally, speaking of bombing things to the ground versus building them, a little bit of news on what's going on in the Gaza Strip. So there's a lot of reports out in the past week about what's been happening there, and the dire conditions that people living there are facing. Over 100,000 people left homeless after Israel's targeted bombing of the Gaza Strip last summer. Out of the 18,000 homes destroyed, and after that summer, billions of dollars were pledged to help rebuild Gaza, not one home has been rebuilt. Not one out of 18,000. So 100,000 people homeless, jobs, water, electricity, all scarce, not easily available, even food. And Gaza Strip is said to have the highest unemployment rate in the world. The entire population right now is dependent on international assistance. So basically what you have in Gaza right now is not only one giant refugee camp, but you have basically an apartheid situation, and you essentially have people imprisoned in their own land. They are dependent on what Israel allows in or allows out, and that's a limited aid. Even some aid is not allowed in or out. Some countries are trying. I think Qatar just had a proposal to try to get some more electricity going in the Strip. But Israel is reviewing the proposal. Not a lot being done, and it's been over a year that they bombed this place out, and and you've seen the pictures. It's a war zone. It's terrible what's happening. I don't know if you heard the reports about raw sewage. There's not even the sewage treatment plants aren't even functioning properly. So you have this horrible situation, and in fact, the United Nations has said that by 2020, basically less than 5 years, the entire area could become inhabitable. That means it will not be possible to live there because there's no resources available, there's no work available. There is resources and work, but it's so limited and so irregular that it's not reliable. So we have a terrible situation here. We still have, the odd refugee getting shot, or not refugee, the odd Palestinian getting shot by Israeli soldiers. And in fact, during that campaign last summer, I think something like 1,800 Gazans were killed, and that's versus something like 87 Israeli soldiers killed. So this is an ongoing thing. These people are being suffocated and starved to death, and basically no water. They're dependent on aid. You can't even go fish because your boat will be shot out of the water. It's just awful. And this, more and more, there's more and more calls for sanctions, but I just want to bring this up because there's another situation where we have sort of the epitome of what I'm talking about, this idea of borders, and people are talking about, well, Israel's saying it's a safety issue, they're trying to kill us, well, come on, people. I mean, yes, there's people out there who don't like you, but do you think it's helping any of what you're doing? Not only that, I mean, you can control a border and still allow people in there food. You can allow them to rebuild their power plant. You can allow them to rebuild their sewage treatment plant. You can help them rebuild their homes. What you're doing is above and beyond. Not only that, you're taking land, these settlements, illegal settlements by their own rules. You've got people who just go out there and self-help Israelis and take these Arabs' land. So what they've done is another situation where they've gone too far, and now their only option, and I'm sure they're thinking it but not saying it, is basically and this is the irony of it, they're talking about Iran saying wipe Israel off the face of the map. Well, this is exactly what Israel is trying to do to Gaza. They don't feel there's an alternative solution. They don't want to accept a two-state solution. So what's the alternative? Extermination. Get rid of them all. Wipe them out. Starve them out. Make it unlivable. So that's exactly what they're doing, and folks, they're doing it right before the world's eyes. Not only that, this warmonger, I just don't have a lot of nice things to say about Benjamin Netanyahu. He came over here, he insulted the president, he tried to tell the U.S. Congress what to do. He's basically saying no compromise with Iran, no negotiations with Iran. All he wants to do is bomb the country. He wants us to go to war. And a lot of these people are supported in part. They get, on top of that, we're sending them millions and millions of dollars for their military industries there. So don't have a lot of nice things to say. This has become a deeply ingrained sociopathic issue with a lot of Israelis, and it's just, I'm sorry to say, no one should be persecuted, not Israelis, not Gazans, not Palestinians, and what's happening is wrong. Whatever you want to say about what the dangers are or what's been done in the past, two wrongs still do not make a right. And, it's terrible, and it's time for it to stop. And one thing I will say this, if nothing else, there's been a rising call from Western countries for sanctions against Israel, but if nothing else, we need to stop sending them money. I don't care what else is going on in the Middle East. First of all, let's take that money and start building something. Let's build in Gaza. Let's build in North Africa. Let's build in Syria. Let's start building something instead of giving that money to people who are doing nothing but just killing people and making their lives miserable. Okay, it's time to stop that. It's time to put an end to this military aid that is going directly to ruin the lives of human beings around the world. And so it's a terrible situation. I just want to bring this up. This is another aspect of this border situation, and and these people can't even become refugees. They're not allowed to leave the country. They make conditions unlivable, and now they won't let them leave. So it's pure torture, it's pure misery, it's sadism, plain and simple. Now there are some, bright spots. There are, of course, people still making a living in Gaza. There are things going on and businesses operating, restaurants, that kind of thing. It's not completely dead. It's not, Mad Max there right now, but it is miserable for hundreds of thousands of people. Just on a little anecdotal note, at one gym, which is a kind of a new place to work out, that can tout membership of over 500 Gazans, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Iron Whey protein, a tub, costs $130, almost triple the price it would cost at a California gym. So that's how much it takes just to get some whey protein to work out. And in fact, these guys say we have nothing else to do. There's no job. So instead of becoming depressed, sitting at home, or becoming a militant, we go to the gym and pay $130 for some protein powder. So that's all that I have for this week. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Again, check us out, therationalprogressive.com. Leave me a comment, click like or subscribe, and we will love to hear from you. You can shoot us an email below in the comments. There's some helpful links. Catch us on Facebook or Twitter, and hopefully we will see you again next week. I'm James Andre. Have a great week.